the Happy Scientist podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happyscientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Scientist podcast from Bitesize Bio. If you want to become a happier, healthier and more productive scientist, you are in the right place. I'm Nick Oswald, the founder of bitesizebio.com, where we provide bioscience researchers with help for improving their technical skills, their soft skills and their well-being. In this podcast we'll be focusing on the latter of these three areas. And with me, the driving force of the podcast is Kenneth Vogt. I've worked with Ken for over 7 years now, with him as my business mentor and colleague, and I knew that his expertise could help a lot of researchers, and that is why we started this podcast. In these sessions we'll hear mostly from Ken on principles that will help shape you for a happier and more successful career. Along the way I'll pitch in with points from my personal experience as a scientist and from working with Ken. So let's bring in the man himself. How are you today, Ken?
Doing great, Nick. So here we are in part 2 of our 3-part series on how to discover and wield your charisma factors. So, the last episode, we made the case for why you should care about charisma. And I want to reiterate a little bit of that because this is really important. The things that you hope to accomplish in your life and in your career are not going to happen if you are an island. You are going to need other people. You're going to need their help. You're going to need their support. You're going to need their leadership and guidance in some cases. You're going to need their labor in some cases. Whatever it turns out to be, to get other people to help you, charisma is the one thing you must have to inspire them, to bring them along with what it is you hope to accomplish. Now, charisma, we've talked about how it could be used for evil, but you know what? Nick and I, we trust you. We think you're not going to use it for evil. That's why we're willing to share this with you. and even if you're just operating from a neutral stance of just wanting to be persuasive about getting things done your way, we assume that you've put some thought into what it is you're trying to accomplish in the world, what you're trying to accomplish in the lab, and you feel it's going to serve some good. If you think it's really going to be world changing, well, then it is imperative that you get your charisma house in order. If you are doing something that is for the benefit of mankind, if you really feel that burning inside of you, then it behooves you to make sure you can marshal other people to help you with this. And charisma is the way that you're going to get that done. So I want to go back again to that dictionary definition, just to staple this up there. That charisma is compelling attractiveness or charm that can inspire devotion in others. Now, last week's episode, you might have heard that and said, well, that lets me out. Can't do anything like that. But hopefully, after you listened for a little while, you thought, maybe I could do that, at least to a certain degree. And we used Nick as an example and his side project, his band. And yes, can they be compelling? I've seen the videos. Yes. Can they be attractive? Yeah, they can be. Can they be charming? Oh, absolutely. Do they inspire people? I've seen pictures of the crowd. I've seen videos of the crowd. Definitely. Devotion? Well, people keep showing up for the shows, so something's going on. So here's the point. Here's a guy that didn't structure his life to be a rock star. He's put in all the hard work and effort that you did to get a PhD and then actually work in a lab, and do the work. And yet he did this other thing on the side that showed that he could have charisma, and he's been able to bring that same thing to bear in the business of Bitesize Bio. So I'll toot on Nick a little bit more here in that Bitesize Bio is not a small operation. You can imagine, with thousands of articles and webinars on the website about technique in the laboratory, in some cases very high level technique, this required bringing some very busy and important people into this work to give of themselves to share these things in many cases. And of course he had to assemble a team of people that were capable of understanding the nature of the content that is being presented there, and not only would be able to read it understandably, but would know whether or not it was good advice. Because I'm gonna digress into a little something that has to do with me this time. See, I've done consulting and coaching for many, many different businesses across many industries. And I felt that I'd gotten to a point where I could take on any new industry. It was no problem because I'd seen it all. Whatever you've got, I can handle it. It won't be a problem. And then I encountered bioscience. And I just got the wind kicked out of me because all of a sudden I was among a bunch of people that used a language I didn't understand. They used words to describe concepts that I didn't understand. I hadn't felt that ignorant since I was a child as I listened to all this stuff. And I realized, well, I've really gotta be humble here and be willing to learn. And so, I've made an effort to get in with this crowd, this crowd of scientists. And I've learned to use phrases, like PCR and flow cytometry, and I almost sound like I know what they mean. The point being of all this, though, that for me to be charismatic in this space, I had to do a lot of listening. I had to ask a lot of questions because at the end of the day, I need folks to listen to what I'm saying. I am an expert on the areas that I'm an expert on. And for them to respect me there, I was going to have to show respect for their space and what they knew. And that's one thing I think actually comes a little bit more naturally among scientists than among other people. You're used to encountering people that are experts about something that you just haven't had time to have expertise in. There's so much there that no one can know it all, and so you have the opportunity for a mutual admiration society, as it were, which is fine. But the beauty of that is that when you show admiration for the other person, they are somewhat compelled to show admiration for you if you can demonstrate that you're a peer to them. That okay, you know something I don't know about. Now here's something that I know about that you don't know about. And if you present it in the right way, you can help bring people along. So that's the question then. What's the right way? How do I take this and get people on board with the way I'm seeing things and what I think ought to be accomplished? Well, just like we had with human needs and just like we had with core mindsets, I was looking for a set of things that could be remembered, that would be small enough that people could just hold it in their heads and not have to be referring back to a manual all the time, and where it would be complete enough that it would, in most cases, cover everything they needed. So we're going to discuss 6 charisma factors that anyone can implement. Some people will be outstanding in implementing some of these things, and as you're listening to these, you'll be able to pick out the ones that are best for you. And I want to be clear here, this is a little different than human needs. With the 6 human needs, everybody has all 6 at all times. It's just the level of importance of each of them shifts from person to person, but they're all there all the time. That is not the case with charisma factors. These 6 charisma factors, you are not required to be good at all 6 of them. You You can be good at a few of them. You can be good at one of them, and it will be enough. So don't feel overwhelmed by this. When you start hearing some of these and you go, oh, I could never be that. Okay, fine. Don't worry about that one. We'll move on to the next one after that. But it's also good for you to recognize these factors in other people, because you will see then why other people are getting their way, why other people's projects are being promoted when yours isn't. You'll see what's different about what they're doing versus what I'm doing. And it will help you to maybe not be as put out by that. Because, hey, when people are being charismatic, when they're being persuasive and inspiring, well, things should happen. And you can't be jealous about that stuff. You can't be envious about it. Like, why can't I have that? Well, you can. You just have to do the things that they're doing. And if you can't do everything that they're doing, well, do some of the things that they're doing and at least get some of the results that they're getting. So before I dive into these, is there anything you wanted to add, Nick?
No, I think, the only thing relevant, again, we go back to the band situation and Bitesize Bio. So the beginning of we bootstrapped Bitesize Bio from nothing. And so looking back on it, I must have had some charisma, as in people wanted to work with me when we had we couldn't pay people to do anything and things like that. So that
definitely takes charisma.
So, but I think it's the same. I just didn't realize that was charisma. It's just me being me. And but then the interesting thing is that then to do the band situation, or to be able to increase my charisma to an effective level, to be able to meet the challenge for the band, that required focusing on that innate charisma and amplifying it and actively working on it. And so that's probably the situation for a lot of people. You are probably being charismatic without realizing it, but then there are by looking at other people, you can figure out, and then by going with the pointers that you give, Ken, then you can turn up the volume on that charisma that you already have, and that's really what the situation is, I think.
Exactly.
And one other thing is that along the way, Bitesize Bio and the band, I've drawn heavily on. I've always, if I could get help, then I've taken it. As in, I got Kenan to help me in Bitesize Bio. For the band, I got a singing teacher. I got and he was in a proper band, like a very successful band, and so he was able to give me the confidence that I could actually do that, transfer some of his confidence, if you like, or I've done various things that where I have deliberately put myself in a situation where I had to learn from someone else, and or rise to the occasion, and those both seem to have the effect of amplifying the charisma.
Sure. And I can say, having worked with people at Bitesize Bio for several years now, and there has been a change in personnel over time, but when I first started working with him, it was a good team of people that Nick had drawn, and over time it's gotten better and better and better. He's drawing better and better people, and he's almost doing it on automatic now, because he's installed this charisma now, and it's showing up. And you're gonna hear some of these as we talk about them. You're gonna be able to guess which ones work for Nick. It's gonna be obvious to you, and probably even just from hearing me on this podcast, you're gonna recognize some of my charisma factors. And I'll point out some of that stuff too. And this is not about obviously we're not just trying to look good in front of anybody. This is not an ego stroke to say, well, look at me, I'm charismatic. It's necessary to be charismatic, and it's actually not that uncommon. So it's feeling all special about it is kind of silly.
It's not very difficult either, actually, once you understand it.
Yeah, and so it's silly to get egotistical about this stuff, but it is also silly to pretend it doesn't matter. Like, I don't need that. Or, well, that's for other people, or it's, or I can't, to say you can't do something that is well within your capability is also, it's a kind of an inverse egotistical position to take. So, being egotistical is not a good thing, in case I haven't made that clear. Being humble is a very good thing. And sometimes that's counterintuitive to folks. The humility seems like, well, that wouldn't work, but it does. People are drawn to humility. People are offended by egotism. So, it'll become clear as we talk about some of these. So now these 6 factors, we're going to consider them in order. And here's the order: alphabetical, because there is no order. There's no link particularly between one to another or anything. That's kind of the point. There's no crossover between these. And there isn't one that's more important than another. Because I promise you can have merely one of these, and if you nail it, it will be more than enough, and you will stand out. And that's what this is about. It's standing out for a good reason. You're not standing out because you want to pretend to be important or because you want attention. You're standing out because it's in service of a greater goal. It's in service of a mission that you have put yourself in charge of. So that's the point of all this. So the first charisma factor we're going to cover is being admirable. That is, being someone who is respectable, reputable, and honorable. That is not something that a lot of folks automatically think of when it comes to charisma. But having people admire you because they believe you are a good person and that you have the greatest good in mind for others is very, very powerful. And there's a graphic we have in the show notes that's going to cover all of these characteristics, and it's got some example people from history that you'll recognize. But if you think back about it, if you think about the people that you admire, aren't you willing to do things for them? Aren't you willing to follow their advice? Aren't you willing to put yourself out for somebody that you admire? And it might be somebody you admire, in a really big way. You admire them because they're Winston Churchill and they took England through World War II. Okay, well, that's something that you might deeply admire. Or it could be just like I admire my 2nd grade teacher. She gave me a love of reading, and it stayed with me my whole life. So being admirable can show up in a lot of ways. So one thing I would like to point out here, when you look at something like Bitesize Bio, and you think, who would have started something like that? Who would have bothered to put together a bunch of tools to help lab-based scientists at the bench? Who would have bothered to do that? And you think, wow, that's really great, because there really isn't anything out there like it. It's a one of a kind. And now it's gotten to the point where if you also had the same kind of desire to help, being able to do something like this, you might look at it and go, wow, I don't know how I could possibly catch up to that. Well, there's something admirable about Bitesize Bio. And admirability, you can see it in an organization, but ultimately it comes down to the people. Ultimately there's a person there that you're going to admire. And it might be somebody you admire in your department, and you might admire people for different reasons. You might admire somebody's work ethic, or you might admire their intellect, or you might admire their curiosity or their stick-to-itiveness. There's lots of things that can be admired, and you can take a self-inventory and say, what about me is admirable? And I know the first thing you'll do is you go, well, I can know exactly what's not admirable about me. I'm lazy and I'm smelly and I'm stupid and I'm, okay, get those out of the way. But then go, what is an admirable? What is there that's admirable about me? And you may be surprised how many things you can find. And once you identify it and you realize, well, you know what? All ego aside, I'm pretty smart. And I've worked hard at it too. So I'm not just smart, I'm educated. I'm erudite. I'm a deep domain expert in certain places. Well, once you have that and you realize, okay, now that's something that I can use for charisma. Now, you don't run around and tell, you don't introduce yourself like, hi, my name's Ken. I'm a deep domain expert on how to motivate people, No, you don't do it like that. But you find ways to make it known. And especially if you can let other people make it known. Create the opportunity for other people to speak about why you are respectable and reputable and honorable and admirable. Like I just did about Nick.
Oh, thank you. It's not embarrassing.
Is there anything you don't want to add on admirability, Nick?
Okay, I did exactly what you said, what you suggested, and that I went straight to what are things that I admire about other people that I don't admire about myself, if you like. Mm-hmm. Like one of them being, I don't have particularly good, I definitely don't have particularly good time discipline, for example. I'm not the most disciplined person in the world, but I really respect that in other people. So perhaps one way to look at that is that that's one area to grow in. If I wanted to focus on that and expand, then that would expand my my charisma, if you like. Would that be one way to look at it?
Sure. And it's also, the other side of it is, well, let's say, I've never been that good about time management, and maybe you'll just decide, you know what, I'm never going to be a model in that area, so maybe I shouldn't bother to put my attention there as far as gaining charisma over that. But what about me am I good at? What do I have that isn't actually coming that hard, that I feel naturally drawn to do? And it might be, I really like to be creative, and I really like to think outside the box, or I'm very structured. I mean, I cross my T's and I dot my I's. You can count on me in this area. I remember a software engineer that I once know, and there was a big meeting going on about some software that was being developed, and there was a lot of pressure. And somebody said, well, maybe there's a bug over in this area, and it was an area that was covered by this particular engineer. And he didn't even get up. He didn't even hardly look up. He just said, there are no bugs in my code. And everyone just went, nope, there's not. Because that's something he owned. He was so methodical about this stuff that he could make a statement like that without having to check. He could just say, I know my stuff is tight. And that was something that everyone admired about him. So if he said something worked, we believed him. We would march to war on those orders.
So you would definitely recommend just focusing on the positives rather than the negatives.
Well, it's certainly worth noticing the negatives if there's something there that might be easily fixed. But in this case, when it comes to charisma, I would say there's more ground to be. There's more benefit to you to focus on the things you're already good at. So if you're a great tennis player and a not so good football player, well, play tennis. Yeah, you could get better at football, but you may never be as good as you are at tennis already. And since you're already good at tennis, well, why not get better at tennis? So that works easier for charisma. It'll be hard, it won't be as hard on you. Because there's one thing about charisma. Charisma is something that happens kind of on a public stage. Charisma is something you have to do in interaction with another person. There's no, you can sit at home with your guitar or your microphone and you can practice playing guitar and singing. But at the end of the day, it's the getting up on stage that's going to matter. So charisma is like that too. Ultimately, you have to be able to do it in front of people. So do stuff you're going to feel more confident about. It's a little easier on you. So let's look at a second characteristic as we move down the alphabet. And this one is someone who is commanding. That is, they're authoritative, masterful, and assertive. Now, we've all definitely seen people like that. That it's a crisis situation and somebody just jumps up on the table and takes charge because they're commanding. And people want somebody to tell them what to do, and they will follow that person because they were looking for somebody to follow in a difficult situation. So being commanding, again, you can do a self-assessment there. Am I good in a crisis? Am I somebody that really grasps the big picture and can articulate it? If you've got that, oh man, it's a very powerful way of exercising charisma. And now I'm going to break a rule that I just made a minute ago. Remember how I talked about how admirable Bitesize Bio was and that Nick had created it, and I said, better that somebody else speak about it? Commanding is my main charisma factor. It is the strongest one for me. And I'll bet, even though I'm saying it right now, and all you've done is heard me on a few podcasts, you're going, yeah, that sounds about right. Because I do have that particular kind of presence. It's not something that I have to work at. That is pretty natural for me, and it's been natural for me for a very, very, very long time. And I'm like Nick, I too am a musician, and I've been in bands, and I've been the lead singer of bands, because I wanted to be the lead singer. I didn't just want to be in a band. So I had a conversation once with a fellow bandmate. Now, I'm the lead singer in the band. I play guitar, but I preferred at the time especially to just be the singer. Our lead guitarist, who was a very, very good guitarist, was also a decent singer. He could have been lead singer in the band. And the band existed before I came along. I had auditioned to be in this band. And so I didn't get it one time I was talking to him and saying, why did you need a lead singer? Because you're a good singer, and frankly, it's so much easier to sing than to play guitar. And he said, it's funny, I was going to talk to you about the same thing, except I see it the opposite way. I was going to ask you, why do you sing when it's so much easier to play guitar? So, we had different views on it. And this person, commanding was not his nature. And that was one of the reasons he shied away from it. It wasn't that he couldn't sing well, he was afraid to. He was concerned how much attention it would draw to him. And the other folks in the band chimed in, like, yeah, we all can hide behind our instruments, but you're just up there naked, just you and a microphone. And I thought, I find the instruments to be in the way. I'm glad they're not there. So it was. Some people have that kind of characteristic about them, and those of you who have this, you're going to recognize this. You're going to hear me talking like this and go, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, some other folks, you're going to listen to it and go, that's not me. And some others of you are going to listen to this and go, what a blowhard. And again, it's not for you, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be for you. Although, if you can use it, do. And I will use Nick as an example there, and lead singer in a band where he is playing a role, being commanding is quite useful. So, Nick, I will toss you under the bus right now and say, have you found any usefulness for being commanding in your role there?
Well, it's quite interesting actually, because I thought that I was thinking that the charisma factors that I was brought to start Bitesize Bio, and then the ones I brought into the band were the same, but actually I don't think so. I think naturally I'm more communicative. I can't say it, that's quite funny. Communicative, and but in the band actually it's the commanding that I've turned up the volume on, and so that must have been there a bit, and I've turned it up a bit more, and then that's what I've needed to do for the band. So I suppose uninhibited as well, and the communicative as well, reducing inhibitions. Certainly not getting rid of them all. It's by no stretch of the imagination, but reducing them, working to reduce them is the way it's worked. Yeah.
Right. And in reference to the band too, remember folks, this is a band that already existed that was auditioning for a singer, and yet Nick has basically taken over the band. He's the leader now. Well, that isn't because he is an evil genius. It's because he brought a commanding character to it, and they needed that, and it worked for them. And they've had some personnel changes, but they continue to draw good musicians into the band because partially because there's a commanding presence there that feels like a stable place for somebody that is, if they're going to bother to work at this, that, this is going to go somewhere. This is going to be an actual band. We're not just going to practice and dream about playing for people. We're actually going to be out there playing. So Nick was peeking from behind the curtain there, and he spoke of the third one, and that's being communicative. And being communicative means that you're expressive, you're uninhibited, and you're candid. And I agree with Nick what he's saying, that being communicative was extremely important for the launching of Bitesize Bio, because the whole point of it was to communicate vital information that was not being taught in university and was often not even being taught in labs, in that there was a certain lack of mentorship there, not because of a desired no interest in it, but because people didn't have time, or there just wasn't a sharing of the riches, as it were. Some labs had multiple people that could have been great mentors for new scientists, and other labs didn't have any. So being communicative about these important topics became just critical for the success of Bitesize Bio. And again, you look at yourself and say, does this describe me? Am I expressive? Am I uninhibited? Am I candid in my communication? When you look at that and you say, that is me, well, then look for opportunities to communicate. And when you think about the point of communication is making sure that the other person understands at the end. The point of communication isn't for you to talk. It is for you to be understood. So look for that. Look for your opportunities there. Now, if this doesn't speak to you, you feel like, I've never been good at this. I don't know. You may find that, okay, maybe I'm not good at being a public speaker, but if I have time to think about it and I can write it down, I do pretty well with that. Well, pay attention to that. For some of you, your best means of communication is going to be public speaking. For others, it's absolutely going to be not public speaking. It's going to be white papers and reporting and emails and other mediums. So find what's good for you if there's something good for you in being communicative. And I'll let you weigh in a little bit there, Nick.
Sure. Be communicative.
That's right. Go for it.
I was kind of deep in thought there. I was just thinking, so how do you break this open for people if it seems still a bit dense? But we as you said, there is a graphic in the show note that outlines these those factors, different areas in which your natural charisma resides. And so that you can then focus on it and expand it. I have to say, for me, when it first occurred to me that I was in the communicative area, that was my charisma factor, it was quite a relief, because I was trying to be charismatic by being something that I wasn't, and or I shied away from being charismatic because I felt it was something that I wasn't. And it's quite a relief to know that you can be influential by resting in what you already are, and just expanding that. And so I would encourage people to really look at that chart, that graphic, and just see where, really look to see where what feels comfortable for you, what area feels comfortable for you, and then look for ways to expand.
Right. You just pointed out something too that's an interesting little point. And that is, what is your objective here for all this? For some people, their objective is to be influential. For some people, their objective is for everyone to know that they're influential. That second one might be very, very intimidating for some folks. But if you could be influential behind the scenes, you don't have to be up front, that's fine. So it's like being the drummer or the bass player. That they're critically important in a good band, and if they're not good, nobody understands why, but they just don't like the band. Well, it's because that backbone isn't there. Well, if you're more that backbone kind of person, awesome. Be influential. And you can be influential by taking on some of these characteristics that aren't necessarily so forward. So being admirable can be a very quiet way of being charismatic. So, commanding and communicative are a little louder. And you can also see there's combinations here now, too. If you could be both commanding and communicative, the things you could do. Or if you could be both commanding and admirable, the things you could do. And we're going to have some others that we'll look at that are a little quieter, too. So right now you think, two of these are so hard. I mean, I can only do one. Well, there's three more. We'll cover them in the next session, and you'll see what is possible for you. But if one is powerful, two, they're multiplied. So these are multipliers. It's not addition here; it's multiplication.
Yeah,
so.
I don't know if this is a general thing, but I find it easier. The more that I expand in one, I find it easier to expand in another area or to bring in other areas. Just looking back, I didn't do it on purpose, but I can see just from these three that there are areas that, because I've taken opportunities to force myself into these, or not force myself to, but to give me opportunities to expand in these in different areas, then it's easier to expand in other areas just kind of naturally.
Right. And remember those three things I said you could bring to the table for each factor: presence, power, and warmth. So imagine what you could do in each of those cases. If I just focused on one of the crossovers there of presence and admirable, what could I do? I just focus on power and commanding, what could I do? If I just focus on warmth and communicative, what could I do? So there's lots of opportunity here. None of this is overwhelming. Any little bit you do to be more charismatic is beneficial. This isn't the kind of thing where you have to reach some critical mass before it's useful. Anything you do here is going to help.
And it's maybe good to just touch on what that helps with, and what it helps you to do is to connect with people, and to rally them to whatever it is that you're doing. Is that a good description?
Yeah, it's rallying them to your cause.
Yeah. Which is not a selfish thing. It doesn't have to be a selfish thing. That's the good. The more we rally to each other's causes, the better everything becomes.
Right, and it does give you the opportunity to look at your own cause. It's like, is this a cause worth rallying to? Should I bother to add any charisma to this, or is this thing not that important? And it might give you a chance to take a look at, maybe you've sold yourself short, and so you've set the bar really low, and that's why you've never bothered to add any charisma to anything. We'll set the bar a little higher, where that some charisma is going to be necessary. Give yourself the chance to do better than you thought you were going to do, and see what you can do. And if you get help, you may be able to do a lot more than you thought you could do. Certainly more than you could have done alone.
That's an interesting one. I'm going to think about that.
All right. Well, we will leave Nick to think about that one, and next week we're going to cover some more charisma factors. So that's pretty much a wrap for our session today.
Okay, thanks guys, thanks everyone, and just to remind you that you can get the graphic for the show about the charisma factors on the show notes for episode 8, and you can also join us at facebook.com/the Happy Scientist Club, all one word, to get more about charisma factors and everything else that we talk about in this podcast. So we'll see you in the next episode.
All right, thanks everybody.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.